Hello, and welcome to Supply Chain Next. I'm your host, Richard Donaldson. Join me as we explore the ongoing evolution of supply chain, from the challenges practitioners face every day to the ongoing digital transformation of the entire value network.
And welcome to the next episode of Supply Chain Next. And I am thrilled to be here with Tyler Wood, who is out of Florida. Hey, Tyler, how you doing?
Good, Richard. How you doing, man?
Fabulous. Really looking forward to the conversation today, and and going through and kind of getting ready for it. And I already asked you to sort of pre the show here, pre the recording, but I'm going to just jump right into it. I mean, there's a story here that I think people need to know about you and who you are, and you've written a book about it. And we'll get into sort of your career stuff, but I'm going to jump right to that sort of elephant in the room. Because that to me, and I've actually picked up the book. I haven't read it yet, but would love to hear from your own experiences. So I think that it's amazing.
Sure. Thank you. Well, it's been a few years. I think this Halloween, it's funny you ask, this Halloween will be the 7th anniversary of rescuing my son from Bangladesh, who was abducted by his mother. And wow. I was forced into a situation where I had to go there and find the resources on the ground and the friendships and the human connection with people that cared, that would go out of their way to, make a difference and do something right. Yeah. And it was amazing. I made, friends out of the whole thing that will, last forever. So it was a bit cathartic for me to write a book about it, but the foreword is kind of a mini manual on how to avoid or resolve international parental child abduction.
Well, I mean, first and foremost, I'll ask kind of the obvious question there is, how did that change you? I mean, A, it's your child. B, you're going through something that is honestly they write books about this, no pun intended, right? But when you actually can hear someone firsthand, I mean, you kind of go over it, but there must have been a deep impact to you as a person, a human, as a father, as a human being, and just kind of what you went through. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I think it's almost an exercise in patience.
Yeah.
Really. And ultimately, I think when problems are confronted, I'm confronted with problems. I think that, that's not so big of a problem.
Oh, you're right. Your prioritization changes quite a bit.
Yeah, right. I came back and I was really, I think another thing also, it forces one to kind of think about, being the best parent you can be. And I think some people and some parents may have their kid, half the time or a quarter of the time, and they're not really present. And I think that being present and enjoying their life and watching them grow and spending that time with them is, irreplaceable.
Yeah.
So I do quite a bit. I do, we skateboard around the lake all the time. We go, play on the beach and paddle boarding. We have a, beautiful, beautiful life together.
And let me ask, and I only ask because you guys were chatting before the show. Oddly enough, I have a very close friend of mine that went through something similar, different, but similar, obviously, but Venezuela instead of Bangladesh. But is there any reconciliation with the mom in any way, shape, or form, or no?
Yeah, there was I think there was reconciliation with the family, as well as, to some
That's
extent,
good.
Yeah, to some extent, the mother, and communications and reorientation. But I mean, ultimately, it's something that eventually will happen when everyone's, older, and not have to deal with such, extremes.
Yeah. Well, again, it's just one of these where, first of all, you can't make this type of stuff up. It's, I mean, what a ordeal to go through. And I think you hit the head of the nail. I mean, it's a life changer in that, life itself has a different view, as you described, kind of coming out of something like that, right?
Well, I think most people would see this challenge where, when you're a 4-year-old child figures out how to Skype and says, Daddy, I just want to come home. And, that's what you're like, you got to, program yourself for, getting the job done.
Right. Well, hey man, we'll move on from that. As the listeners will see, there'll be a link to the book and everything. I just picked it up. Honest, I haven't read it yet, but definitely want to dive into it. And again, one of those stories. Again, most people don't get a chance firsthand to hear how something like this happens, and it's just. Anyways, we'll leave that one there. Let's get back to the professional stuff. So I had to get that. For me, that was sort of the elephant in the room. So I'm like, oh my god, someone go through this, right? Like, because you could have come on and just been like, all right, I'm out of work. I'm going to be a monk now, or something like that, right? Because it's like, I mean, that's that type of people have those types of reactions. But all right, So that said, put that aside. Tyler Wood, let's talk about your career. Let's talk about kind of how you started, how you got into where you're at. Just kind of a walkthrough at a high level of, coming out of school. You've got a very interesting career path that led you to where you are now in what you're doing in the carbon recapture. But let's just talk. Let's set the stage. How did you get here?
Well, it started 20 years in the hedge fund industry. And at first it was a basket of 8 floor traders that had a minimum of 25 years on the floor. So they were what was known as like the best risk managers on the planet. And I got to learn a bit about their trading styles, and then everything kind of shifted towards systematic and algorithmic and faster frequency trading. But ultimately there was a lot of medium to long-term trend following in commodities and the raw materials of civilization. And so you kind of start tracking the supply chains and what's important and what makes the world run. And so I was kind of forced into learning tremendous and amazing trade thesis over the period of time, and it ultimately led to identifying what we're going through in this transition as the biggest opportunity in the history of mankind to shift from a linear extractive economy into a circular regenerative one. Right.
And this is sort of put some time frames around it. You and I are pretty close to the same age, so I'm thinking this is sort of the 90s when you're kind of doing the hedge fund thing ish.
Late 90s following into it, and then it was. I was funny. I was a student of money, the rise and falls of monetary systems. I was living on Martha's Vineyard at the time, and in the winters you can choose to either be an intellectual or an alcoholic.
Oh my goodness! I was just across the bay from you in Nantucket. I lived there for a full winter. So
I mean, it's beautiful. I love it. It's like a beautiful place, but the winters are, you got to figure out what to occupy your mind with, and really just was studying the rise and falls of civilizations and money, and fascinated with me. And then it got me involved in the hedge fund industry, working with a firm out of New York.
Okay. And hedge funds, though, and again, to be specific, because you talk about looking at commodities and specifically then getting into the supply chains and the raw materials. Again, by definition, hedge funds can really focus on anything, right? So why were your hedge funds, or how did you end up in an area that sort of led you into these commodities, which led you to raw materials, and then we get into circularity? I mean, was that by design, or you just kind of fell into it?
I think, I mean, maybe it was by design in some way, that I was just kind of following my natural inquisitiveness of what's happening. Ultimately, the Farm Bill in 2018 happened, and it was the hemp legalization, and that led us into understanding some of the lack of infrastructure in the supply chain of that, and the processing of all the biomass. And then ultimately led us into the most advanced indoor vertical high density biofactory in the world that captures carbon more efficiently than any other process.
Right. And so that kind of leads you into the carbon, but somewhere in around, it looks like, looking at your CV, somewhere in the sort of 2010s, 2012, 2013 was a transition away from investing from a hedge fund kind of investment banking background to really get into what you're doing now, which is focused on sustainability and carbon recapture. And we'll get there. What precipitated that change, and what was why did you leave the investment world to move into this area?
Yeah, and this is I should bring this out. I met. It all started to change when I met our CEO, Alan Witters, and I've met a lot of people with brilliant trade thesis and implementation of the trades, but I never met a brilliant operator that knew how to build multi-billion-dollar companies and large $300, $400 million CapEx and OpEx budgets, and building critical infrastructure. And so that really was a breed of a different person, different mindset of what I'd dealt with before. And whenever I'd introduce him to people, he always seemed like one of the most experienced people I've ever met. And so we just developed a great friendship over the years. And then about 3 years ago, formed Gravitas Infinitum.
Right on. Okay. So let's talk about that. Gravitas Infinitum. I mean, that's a pretty unique value prop. Maybe give a description and what got you. I mean, besides obviously the cult of personality who's running it and founding it, but there's more to it than that. I mean, there's something that brought you here, right, at a more fundamental level. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, we're really looked at it as trying to build the best company on the planet, but it's it takes a lot to say that, but then it takes a lot to actually implement. And so we went about really looking at impact and ESG, sustainable development goals, and took that into account to create zero waste, closed loop systems that are circular. And and I've learned so much. I mean, I'm honored to be working with such an amazing team. And it isn't just Alan, it's like our whole team. It's almost turned into a family because we've all worked so hard at creating what we're creating. And it's kind of like, and I mentioned this, I think, when we chatted before, when you're by yourself dancing at a music conference. And you're the only one dancing, and you're like, man, this music's great, but no one's dancing, but they just haven't tuned in to what you're listening to, and then all of a sudden it becomes the energy center of the whole party. And at this point, I think that we've got a real party going on.
Got it.
With some exciting momentum, and the scale that really moves the needle for what we need to do for climate change.
Well, let's talk about that. So what specifically, Gravitas Infinitum has a couple different things, or maybe if I remember, there's a parent company with a couple different things going on.
Yes.
And they're both interrelated, but you've got the carbon capture. Maybe we can talk about that. Sure. And then the other kind of offshoots, right? Because there's a little bit of an ecosystem you guys have developed. And unlike most people who are doing carbon accounting or carbon offsets, you actually have gone directly at the problem and said, okay, if there's 0.3 to 0.4% carbon in the atmosphere, we're going to go pull carbon out and reuse it for some other stuff. So maybe you can give us a little more details on that.
Yeah. Well, we have to shift our supply chains from hydrocarbons to biocarbons. And you can't be, monocropping corn for ethanol and driving up all of our food prices.
Right.
So within 100,000 square foot footprint, we've got the equivalent of 25,000 outdoor agricultural acres growing 24/7, 365. And that's actually mining carbon out of the atmosphere.
Right.
We're mining carbon out of the atmosphere incredibly efficiently. And so instead of outputs similar to like direct air carbon capture and sequestration, burying it underground, we're actually creating nano biomaterials that are extremely high value and are critical because they're carbon negative. And so everything's built of in the future that were built from hydrocarbons in the petroleum industry is now being built by biocarbons.
And let's differentiate that, right? So because sometimes I think you live and breathe this stuff, almost like the spice chamber in Dune, right? So sometimes people we can step back and can help us understand difference between a hydrocarbon and a biocarbon. And then the follow-up question is, why is it then when you produce these biocarbons from capturing carbon directly from the atmosphere? So you've got a big plant that's actually sucking air in from the atmosphere and extracting carbon, which then is used to produce this biocarbon, right? What is the use cases for those, right? So hydrocarbon versus biocarbon, and then let's get into actually how you do what you do.
Yeah, that's great. So a hydrocarbon is essentially fossil fuels,
right?
Earth trapped.
Yep.
And biocarbon is actually, we're pulling this from biomass. Is the carbon inside of biomass.
Okay.
Like trees.
Yep.
But we're doing it with hemp. And you can also use it with other, feedstocks.
Okay.
And so we process those plants, and a certain percentage is fuel, and then the rest is biochar.
Okay.
And then we process the biochar down into activated carbon, graphite, graphene, and even diamonds.
And how is that specifically? How are you saying when you say it's carbon negative? I think I know the answer, but I'm kind of curious. How is that carbon negative?
We look at it as like a carbon footprint. Is that it was from air extracted, carbon.
Okay.
And that's the critical component of it being carbon negative. It is that it was taken from the atmosphere. So
in a way, or not in a way, what you're actually doing is saying, okay, all you pollutant people, whatever's going on here that's producing this carbon, that's doing the push from 0.3 to 0.4% in the atmosphere, you're actually first and foremost pulling the carbon out of the atmosphere, therefore reducing that footprint, if you will.
Absolutely.
And then using that in a means to create a product that is infinitely more recyclable, circular, biodegradable, whatever, than original hydrocarbons.
Correct.
Okay. And then, and what I want to also clarify is, okay, so pulling carbon out of the air, got that. But then you mentioned kind of the biomass that's used. So is that a part of the equation to create the outputs? You've got to have something to attach the carbon to.
Yeah, the plants are the catchers. So the ultimate technology that we're relying on is photosynthesis.
Interesting.
And so we're allowing photosynthesis to allow the plants to do their work, just like trees capture carbon out of the atmosphere. So are our plants.
Interesting.
And we're doing it, in a footprint that doesn't diminish the biodiversity of our land.
Right.
So it's an incredible efficiency, and it moves the needle. So we're mining carbon out of the atmosphere at less than the cost of mining hydrocarbons out of the Earth's crust.
Wow.
But the interesting component about mining oil is that you have proven reserves and you have a decline rate. And that's the mathematical parameters that they're bound by. But for us, we're mining carbon out of the atmosphere. So we have unlimited proven reserves, and we don't have any decline rate.
Yep. And your output again is actually an alternative to all this other carbon stuff in the supply chain, if not more obviously environmentally friendly and sustainable, but arguably economically beneficial, and potentially, especially if you're dealing with graphene, a better product from a qualitative or quantitative perspective.
Yeah, that's been the biggest problem with graphene to actually capture any serious market share, is that it was so expensive.
Right.
And each of our facilities, as we scale, will be able to provide, communities, the world around, essentially, with both graphite and graphene, but it's our trademarked biographite and biographene. That
are you? Sorry. Oh, I was going to say. So, are you then? Is that so? You are selling some of that today. So, what is that come in like?
Now it's more samples. It's more like samples, to people. But it's to get it to a steady state in a smaller facility that's already been, warehouse. We can build one in about 6 to 8 months, and then 14 months for a full high density biofactory.
Wow.
And that really moves the needle for carbon capture. There was a lot of mention from Climeworks about their first facility in Iceland capturing 4,000 tons of carbon a year. Our high density biofactory would do that in less than 2 weeks.
Jeez.
And instead of burying carbon under the ground, we produce a material that's 200 times stronger than steel, 450% more efficient than lithium, and 1,000% more conductive than copper. Right. You've got, the raw materials that we need to modernize.
Yeah. Well, absolutely right. Now, another kind of question here is that because you're in a multitude of gains here. One, first and foremost, removing carbon from the atmosphere. Awesome. I mean, you could just do that and kick ass, right? Mm-hmm. Now you've tied it to, we're going to also create this material, graphene, right, which has all the properties that you just outlined, and begin to find how to, we're doing it in a way that's more efficient, sustainable, economical, yada, yada, yada. And therefore you can actually bring it into mass production as you guys kind of start getting scale. My question is here, now, where does 3D printing fit into the output of the material that you guys are creating? Because to me, it feels like you could either create sheets of graphene or create a graphene-like powder. It should not matter, I don't think, to your production. But then you can actually sell two different types of graphene, kind of finished graphene or powdered graphene for 3D printing requirements.
Yeah, we can actually produce both top-down and bottom-up graphene, as well as a biographite to offer to, even graphene producing companies, so they don't have to buy their source material graphite from earth-trapped graphite, mines.
Right.
So we're trying to move the needle on decarbonizing, and if we can minimize all aspects of needing to pull stuff out of the earth with a huge carbon footprint, we can air mine the materials necessary for the next stage of modern civilization.
That's awesome. That's amazing. All right. Well, first of all, just unbelievable. I mean, it's just such a powerful story. The timing of it, forget the timing. I mean, it's just a really cool story, right? I mean, it's just like, it's very sci-fi. Like, I'm just imagining these air caps. I mean, it feels like something, when you watch the movie Dune or something like that, some air capturing thing and stuff's getting,
we have some good imagery that's coming out soon with our marketing guys. You'll like it.
Oh, that's cool. Right on. Okay. All right. Well, now, but that's not the only thing you guys are involved in, right? There's more to the story. What more is going on?
Well, last year, in the midst of all of the lockdowns, and we launched T4L, Transportation for Life, and that is an incredible company. It's the timing is so perfect as well. Speaking of timing, an all-inclusive EV electric vehicle subscription company that provides white glove service and all-inclusive, even charging and maintenance and insurance. And it saves you, 10 to 20% on buying or, financing or leasing a vehicle. But you don't have to go through all the brain damage and the time. You just get your car, you ride it, and when you're done, you want to swap it, you want to get a different one, you do it. It's like an iPhone. You don't go in and you have to deal with like a new insurance, a new this, a new that, go to the DMV. None of that is needed any longer. So that business, we put it on, tested the thesis on WeFunder, got 4 times oversubscribed on the crowdfunding round, and it's currently at Start Engine. And we didn't necessarily do it as much for the money as more towards a test casing the reception of it. We found that 30% of the investors became subscribers.
Wow.
So it was a great way to build brand loyalty. Because they're owners and subscribers as well. And as you can see with the Hertz, just ordering 100,000, Teslas,
right?
We're, our timing couldn't be more, impeccable in regards to this transition. And ultimately, we're accelerating the adoption of EVs and a distributed charging infrastructure, because each one of our facilities comes with a charger.
Mm-hmm.
So you're really building that distributed infrastructure, and we are working on. We have plans to build 100 electric vehicles experience centers across the country.
There's a guy that comes to mind, because I just want to reference him here to sort of get in the record of the podcast. But Steve Jurvetson comes to mind. I don't know if you know who he is. He's a big time investor from Sand Hill Road. Big fan of Elon Musk's. I think he and Elon Musk kind of know each other, kind of thing. But Jurvetson's, he started something kind of a storied firm on Sand Hill Road named Draper Fisher Jurvetson, obviously his namesake. And then he's gone off on his own to start investing in a lot of things you're describing. The reason I bring him up, though, is it sounds like, and there's a couple of questions I'm going to get to. One is, what's the cross-pollination between creating the biographene and bio materials that you're creating out of the carbon capture? And how is that then being used in this now EV kind of ride sharing, car sharing? Because I see some overlap there. So I'm going to start there. But where it's leading me to, though, is it really sounds like you guys are at the beginning stages of being kind of an ESG-like incubator, because you got a couple different things going on. There's a consistent thesis or theme to all these things, but they kind of interlock with each other a little bit.
Yeah, it is. I think that the biggest trends of the next 20 or 30 years are going to be all about decarbonization and electrification.
Yep.
That's where we'll be focusing.
Yep.
We had an initial Sustainable Development Goal assessment at 96.8, and the average benchmark in the U.S. is 37.
Jeez.
So there's a long way for everyone to grow up in the world of creating more value than just dollars and cents. Totally.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is, again, kind of go back to the example of investors, 30%, 40% become subscribers in this new EV vehicle kind of fleet concept. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's people literally, and if you're crowdfunding, these are, mini investors, if you will. They're not the typical institutional, high net worth, but kind of the average Joe. But there's a lot of enthusiasm behind it, and therefore they're putting their money right where they want to see this stuff happen. So in a way, you're kind of letting the market dictate the company and where it's going.
Yeah, that's the kind of the B2C component with the crowdfunding and having direct engagement and providing that direct access. And that was really, it taught us a lot, and it actually allowed us to learn a lot of questions and scenarios that we didn't otherwise think of by just talking to some, investment banker. Yep. So now really we're building and customizing and taking from experiences and learning and talking to people that are, instead of just creating an app for this total automation, really learn and see what the customer needs and what they're looking for, and almost talk them through it, and then provide them the educational background, because people don't really have the educational experience or knowledge. You just I'm just going to subscribe a car.
Yep.
So we really have to high touch environment for them to kind of ease their way into saying, yeah, okay. And when do I get it? And wow,
right.
Okay.
Right.
And so I met at the first delivery of the first Tesla. The guy was like, "This is the best ever."
Wow. Wow.
Bottle of champagne.
That's so cool. Well, let me go back to it. So let's talk a little bit about the cross-pollination of the materials, right? So you've got a company that's building kind of raw materials in the graphene, and I'll just stay focused on graphene for a second, because that is kind of the new material of the future for all the properties that you mentioned, kind of electrical conductivity, strength, yada yada yada, weight, blah blah blah. How is that material? Are you guys at the early stage of forming? How's that material then kind of migrating into the EV fleet? Whether it's batteries or actually cars themselves.
It's gonna find its way in a lot of different components, both the battery, the tires, perhaps even the body itself. Because graphene is an additive. Right. So it can be used in solar panels to make them 20 to 40% more efficient. It can be used in batteries. There's an electric car that was released out of China. It's a graphene battery, 620-mile range, and charges 80% in 8 minutes.
Just to be clear, though, when you say it's a graphene battery, and just to clarify, it's a traditional lithium style battery with graphene kind of mixed into it, or how does that?
There's a few different techs that are looking at both solid state graphene battery and then kind of a hybrid lithium graphene, hybrid type of battery.
Okay.
I don't know exactly the style of battery on the Chinese car, but I was fascinated with the distance as well as the recharging speed.
Gotcha.
And so we'll see more and more of that there's already graphene in a lot of things that we just don't even realize in our phones and other things, but it's just been prohibitively expensive.
Right.
And it hasn't been able to really be produced in large scale. It's not I think maybe 50,000 tons a year of graphene, production currently, but
globally.
Globally. So it's not a vastly produced commodity market,
Right.
And it's very dirty. It has a very intense carbon footprint. So being able to find now what was the most hard to get to, most expensive super material now to be able to be mass produced for, hundreds of applications.
Totally.
It's impactful for generations for sure.
Totally. But what's fascinating about the material, and this is what I want to sort of get listeners to sort of tune into, is it's not either or. As you put it, graphene in its current incarnation is an additive material to all sorts of other materials. Now there's still applications where it's 100% pure graphene, but we're not, because it has been historically so prohibitive to manufacture, source, yada yada, for all those reasons. No one was even thinking like, I'm going to have an all solid graphene, plain body or something. Right.
We're just at the very beginning of the applied materials science of graphene and its applications.
Right.
Especially as we are able to bring the cost down, by huge margins.
Yep.
And it really puts it on the usability map for anywhere from concrete to semiconductors and everything in between.
Totally. And then looking again, kind of going into the follow-on question, this is though, because your organization or group, is involved in a couple different things that have synergy, right? You're pulling carbon out, you're producing this graphene. The graphene is now being potentially applied to where a lot of people are seeing use cases is in the EV fleets, right? And there could be multiple other ones. So you kind of have a little bit of an incubator-like feel, even, I don't know if you think of it yourselves that way, but you kind of have you got the investor history. Now you kind of got the operations of building a couple companies, but I get the strong sense that you guys have a roadmap of multiple companies that could spring out of your efforts over the next 10 years. How at a global corporate level, the umbrella is, you guys are kind of a new age incubator. Is that?
Yeah, that's pretty much what we are. And we launched the first carbon negative green bond in the world.
Wow.
$100 million green bond just this month, or a few weeks back. But we have, out of all the billions of dollars of green bonds, none of them have been carbon negative.
Right.
And so it's pretty incredible, and it's convertible. So the people that participate at the bond level and convert into equity actually own all of these things that we're building and doing. And it's really exciting for people, because a lot of times green bonds were horrible. They're not horrible. They just, they didn't have a really big yield there. Right. It wasn't, and you basically had a debt instrument. Now you have some debt protections, but you don't get the loan to own type of aspect of it. And the kicker of that participation over the long run.
Mm-hmm.
And, we envision, thousands of Carbotura facilities necessary around the world. And we're basically looking at it like a Coca-Cola bottling licensing franchise scenario where we can get that speed to scale around the world. Because if we're gonna move the needle on capturing as much carbon as we need to, that's like, we need 100,000 of these.
Yeah, no, for sure. So, and again, I don't want to gloss over this because you've lived and breathed this for your career, but $100 million green bond, and let me just get this straight, that's actually the underwriting funding for this incubator concept to an extent. So it's your company's debt instrument. People can buy pieces of it. But what's different about it now is that, again, that's sort of your input to fund all these activities that you guys are doing. So you, instead of going out to the venture capital and private equity world, you kind of took your experiences from hedge fund and bond management, whatever, and said, all right, well, we're just going to launch a $100 million. Here's a $100 million debt instrument that funds all the activities we're doing in this incubator. People can come in and buy chunks of that. And oh, by the way, there's a small yield on it like any other bond, but you have the option to convert into equity, which is a complete, if I'm not mistaken, that's a pretty unique model. I don't know of that in many other investment circles right now.
In fact, it's an 8% coupon, and then it's a 2x conversion of both the interest and the principal into equity.
Wow.
So ultimately it's comes out to about 193% return on a secured debt.
Right, which is, so, but again, as a former
at conversion, obviously.
Yeah. As a former banker / investment guy, I'm sitting here going, I'm not sure I've seen a model. Like if I go look at your typical incubators, they're not floating $100 million debt instrument to fund their activity, which is then also convertible, by the way, into equity for the people to jump into it. I've not actually heard that before.
Yeah, well, it literally allows people to really go for a really, big ride.
Yeah, right.
Especially at conversion, because as this grows, we're seeing this. We did a video that was done about us that went viral over the summer, and then in August, we were selected as the top 50 most innovative new companies in the world out of 130 countries, and so the timing was, quite good. But we have had a lot of people reaching out to us asking if we could have these facilities in this country, or this island. And we created an dedicated all-inclusive island plan for helping them get rid of plastic waste.
Totally.
Provide food, renewable energy, water,
totally.
A lot of the things that would help them be more resilient as they are the front lines of climate change.
Yep. Again, I'm just kind of, we've talked before, but I'm even in real time kind of connecting these dots between your funding uniqueness in floating $100 million bond that people can get involved, and I'm assuming anybody can get involved in it, right?
It's accredited investors.
Okay.
You're 506C. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Gotcha. But there may be a chance at some point to open it up through a Robinhood type,
well, both companies we plan on having public, so
right.
We've already, signed term sheets for, tremendous investment.
That's awesome.
At IPO for both T4L and Carbotura.
Yeah, that's
so we've got ourselves. There'll be some announcements in the next couple of weeks that are showing our relationship with multi-billion-dollar investor.
That is okay. Super exciting. So let me kind of bring it a little bit forward, because really when you kind of look at your LinkedIn profile and get a sense, you kind of have the aura of an investor, right? But then when you peel the onion or the curtains pulled back, whatever, it's more of an incubator operator. There's definitely the investment hedge fund kind of thing going on there, but
they're more operators. I'm working with, seasoned operators that have built, large, really large companies.
Right.
And so I've always been dealing with relationships and capital formation.
Yep.
And sharing ideas from brilliant people with brilliant trade thesis, with brilliant people with a lot of money that can communicate with each other and I tried my best to just be quiet and listen and try and retain 2% of the brilliance exchanged between the brilliant parties I've managed to bring together. But those 2% here and there rubs off. It starts adding up.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, osmosis, man. I mean, if you're just if you're fortunate enough to be around those people, it's going to rub off at some point. I get that, right? But where I was also going is because you're also a very frequent speaker, right? You're off on panels, and you kind of you can wear many hats in the panel. You can be sort of I'm an investor in the area. I'm an innovator in the area. We're thought leaders, whatever the case may be. But when you get tapped to speak, it could be any one of those, right? So, where are you spending a lot of your time kind of because you have a lot of places to go speak at, you've got a great story to go tell. Where are you finding the most bang for your buck? I mean, we kind of look to the UN and kind of mixed bag to some extent, and then there's some of these sort of global organizations. I mean, have you found any group that's better than others and who you participated with, that's really bringing the globe's focus on what you guys are doing?
We found some great reception in some interesting areas, and we're actually talking right now with Reuters. Cool. And so they are excited about our carbon negative green bond.
Okay.
And so we're about to finalize a relationship with them for their upcoming Responsible Business USA in November, and then also in April of next year. So those are some really big events, and they've got massive reach, and they've been covering the green bond market for some time. It's a little bit more matured out of Europe, and so this is the perfect time and the perfect story for carbon negative investments. Yep,
absolutely. Now, kind of looking forward a little bit. Again, I'm going to go back to the incubator. So, carbon out of the air, graphene, kind of launch EVs. Without divulging state secrets here, but anything in the future that you guys are looking at to kind of put this graphene or output that you guys are creating to use? Or is it just for now, you got enough on your plate with EVs? Because I imagine there's almost unlimited applications you could go develop.
There's a lot of applications, and we're actually in the process of acquiring a graphene company.
Okay.
And they've got a number of graphene patents, and this allows them to provide a recipe for biographene to their Fortune 5,000 clients, and it's basically ESG graphene, in a sense. And so those Fortune 5,000s need to decarbonize their supply chains, and so who better than someone that has dozens and dozens of patents in the space? So it just made great business sense in that regard.
Yep.
And also we've had great discussions with the Department of Energy for both Carbotura as well as T4L. So there's a lot of work we're doing there in more project, as we scale, because this is literally the number of these things and the speed at which we need to transition to electric mobility and the speed at which we need to decarbonize is so massive that what we ultimately did was we started a nonprofit called the Hot Planet Repair Team. So everyone can just join in, sign on. We need everyone on the planet on board. And we're attaching it to a sustainable impact donor advised fund that go directly to decarbonization and eliminating plastic and, remediating water, being as good a company as efficient a project as possible in its implementation, not the advocacy or the lobbying of it, but the actual projects itself. And so people will be able to donate, anything
Right.
It's just a Sustainable Impact Donor Advised Fund. They can donate real estate, art, collectibles, crypto, cash, and they get the tax write-off at the appraised value at that point. They don't have to actually. They don't actually have to sell it and then pay the taxes on it and then donate it. They get to donate it at that and then carry that forward on their taxes.
I see.
So we'll match that, all those donations, and so that's going to be a blended finance model. I think I called it impact alchemy, so we could really move the needle on getting the supply chains retooled.
Right. It's a great name, by the way, Impact Alchemy. I love that. Now, so graphene's obviously the heart, kind of somewhat heart and soul of what you guys are also producing. Are there any other materials that you guys are flirting with as an output of your direct carbon capture?
Biographite is one, and that allows us to instantly draw into a multi-billion-dollar industry as a carbon negative graphite, at a price that's more competitive and higher quality.
Yep, gotcha.
So we can really focus on that, but we can also even focus on activated carbon, which is what's in air and water filtration, supply chains already.
Yep.
But I with what we're doing in the graphene space, I think really it'll be graphite and graphene and since I'm more in the capital stack, the mad scientists are laughing at my limited answer.
Hey, we're not here to get you on the chemical engineering and properties and all that sort of stuff.
Applied material sciences.
Yeah, you and I would. Yeah, we're the blind leading the blind on that one. So we're no help on that. But now, as an investor, though, and you're looking forward and trying to find use cases for whether it's biographene or biographite, and we've obviously talked about cars, but we've talked about adding it as in 3D printing potentially or something like that. But are there anything in the horizon where you guys are looking to push that material other than just the raw material, right? Like, I mean, the EV car is, you guys are jumping feet first into direct consumer application. You could also, but it sounds like you're also wholesaling these materials out to people who then use it in a bunch of different ways. So the question
we want to be the producer of the raw materials. I don't think for now, as we, basically from the standpoint of our acquisition of the graphene company, that was a, very strategic play. Totally. And I think it ultimately is perhaps something of a target as we look, and grow and what we do and find companies that are innovators. But Alan has been involved with about 40 or 50 M&A transactions, so he speaks that language of deal making and strategic alignment and collaborating and team building. So it's really been a phenomenal learning experience to be by his side and see, and also the input and value of our team that on our meetings is there's no substitute for gray hair.
Yeah. Gotcha.
There you go.
Gotcha. Yeah, right. Exactly. So just going to kind of wind down a little bit, but I also want to recap. So Gravitas Infinitum is the parent company, if I'm not mistaken, right? And then Carbotura is the direct carbon capture from the air.
Yeah, that's a subsidiary division. And then we have T4L.
T4L. That's right.
Yeah.
And then the nonprofit is the people.
The nonprofit is, we built that as basically our blended finance approach to solving the problem and allowing everybody to participate at any level they wish.
Gotcha. And the nonprofit again was called?
Hot Planet Repair Team.
Hot Planet Repair Team, which is another great one. I don't know who's behind the marketing stuff with you guys, but some great names so far, right? Love that.
Very entrepreneurial set we've got.
Very much. And you guys looking forward now, kind of coming out as we're seeing a lot more enthusiasm, getting together. Conferences are starting happening. Where are we going to find you guys? What do you guys got planned over kind of, when we get into 2022? Where are you guys spending your time? Where are you speaking? Are you spending more time in Europe, North America, Asia, all of the above?
It might be all of the above. We really want to focus on the U.S. right now, but we have had interest overseas and in island nations to participate. We've had some international interest on expanding T4L also, but ultimately we live in Naples, Florida, and we have our teams across the country and even around the world now. So we really wanted to focus on the U.S. At first, but as the speed to scale, we're not shy of bringing this to the world, especially on the Carbotura front with its impact, its project financeability, and the scalability that's necessary. There's 1.7 million active oil wells in the United States alone. And we capture carbon out of the atmosphere at a third the price. Right. So you figure how many of these are going to be around the world.
Yep. I mean, Bernard Looney from BP should be your guys' best friend, given his emphasis on getting off fossil fuels for the entire company.
Right. Yeah.
Well, listen, I'm going to wrap up because we're hitting the hour, as all of these things do. It's like you blink and an hour goes by. Could have spent the next 10 hours with you easy. So, would love to, we're obviously going to stay in touch, but, just a wonderful conversation, wonderful human story in meeting you and all the things you went through. Your book's out there about your trials and tribulations and getting your child back. Some congratulations there, but, definitely shout out to that because it's just a fascinating story. And then on top of it, parlaying into what you guys are doing, which is, creating a really unique investment vehicle through a green bond to fund all these really cool incubation ideas. That itself is a story on it. There's just so many little stories in here that you could really expand. It's really pretty amazing.
Well, I think the only book I'm going to write is the one about rescuing my son from Bangladesh. The next is going to be history because we're changing the world.
That's awesome. Well, listen, thank you so much, Tyler, for spending time with us. Really wonderful conversation, and we'll be talking very soon.
Fantastic. Thanks, Richard.
This is Richard Donaldson. Thanks for listening. If you have any comments about the episode or topics in supply chain you'd like us to explore, we'd love to hear from you. You can reach us at supplychainnext@requus.com. And while you're at it, why not check out the Requus platform at supplychain.requus.com. Requus allows you to manage the full asset lifecycle in the cloud, collaborating with your entire value network to buy, manage, and sell your assets. Find out more at www.requus.com.